this conversation comes off of episode 148 that we just put out 2 weeks ago now. It is building muscle over 40, the 8 mistakes we see people making. One of those, which was one of those mistakes being not being consistent, right? Yeah, there was a lot of other ones in there, but man, that thing got a lot of attention. I was like, sometimes, and I've said this before on the show, like I'll hang up we'll push the mics away and I'll go, I don't know about that one. I don't know. I always want to do a good job, but I just don't know how people are going to take it. Dude, the DMs, even phone calls from people, text messages that I hadn't heard from a while, like, dude, I just listened to that. I feel like I feel personally assaulted, because I am that person in this regard. And the 8 mistakes really are just the most common things we see, and they're not unusual. So, but it created a lot of dialogue. And so part of that dialogue was like, look, man, and so many people were like, I have been caught in this trap of, number one, thinking that I have to get it done in 5 or 6 days per week. And the reality of it is I know I'm not going to do that for several reasons. We can talk about those, or I can't do that. So there's a won't and a can't, and we'll discuss that. The other part of it is they're usually like consistent enough maybe at the beginning part of the week, and then it always falls apart at the end for whatever reasons, particularly as you get closer to the weekend, the Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I mean, just walk into any gym. What are the busiest days? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday are usually heavy days, and you watch the traffic die off. Yeah. I mean, you can see that from like data analysis in most gyms. That's what happens in most gyms. So there's something to be said for that. Like, so people start their workouts out strong during the week, and then they kind of taper off. So what's going on if you're tapering off? That means depending on how you've organized your workout program, right, you're missing a good deal of that. Again, if it's a 5-day-a-week program and you sometimes make Thursdays and Fridays and sometimes you don't, how much are you leaving on the table still? Yeah. Right? So there's that part. My point is getting into these discussions and kind of drawing these conclusions with people like, yeah, I guess I'm, the hardest times are as we get later in the week because things come up, or, what put things off, or I'm just kind of losing steam, getting tired, whatever. I'm like, well, these are signs that we should probably be making some adjustments. And then we start talking about that, and they're like, I don't know how to do that because I've just been working out like this for so long that I don't like.
It's almost like a paradigm shift for them, right?
Right. It's like, sure, well, how would I take my workouts from going 5 days a week to moving them down to the 3 days a week that I'm actually making?
Yes.
Make those productive, still build muscle, still stay fit, maybe lose a little body fat. And there's a lot of things everybody wants it all, right? But how do I make it all work? And, effectively what they've planned out for themselves is somewhere in probably the neighborhood of 6 to 8 hours worth of working out when they're really only making about half of that, 3 to 4 hours a week. And there's some other things to kind of talk about there. And I'm not saying like for those people that are already doing 5 days and are staying pretty consistent there, that, they should stop or that they're not being effective. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying a lot of people struggle with trying to get it all done. And there is a way to do this. And I'll make the statement all day long because we watch it happen here all the time. Again, for the reasons that people are only coming 3 days a week for their own reasons, we see tremendous results in both muscle building and in maintenance of fitness, and still making progress from time to time for specific goals if they have them, with adjustments to how hard they're working out, intensity during the time they do show up, diet, exercise, those kind of things, or any activity they're doing outside of here that adds to calorie burning, fitness, and just, I guess, more vibrancy.
Well, you kind of touched on it too with what you're saying, as far as, people, if they're almost setting themselves up for failure, like they're almost missing out on these things. So if they program to do 6 days, but then they only do 3 of those days, one, they're going to miss certain exercises that they need to be doing. Maybe it happens to be the thing they don't want to do, like the squats or whatever it is. But also there's a lot of psychology with consistency in your exercise routine and program, and really anything to be successful. And yes, you want to aim a little bit over your head so you're kind of reaching, but you also want to feel successful. So a lot of reasons why people fall off is when they have these, I'm going to have 3 days, or I'm going to go for 6 days. But then when they miss 3 days of that, then they feel like they failed. So then they have this, they feel they need to comfort themselves, or they feel that they need to change things up, or just they throw their hands up in there and they forget all about it. I didn't do my 6 days I had planned. I only did my 3 days. So that's how they fall off the following week.
Yeah, I see the opposite sometimes too, in that they punish themselves, or they want to, they want to punish themselves and to do more, or somehow going to make it all up.
Yeah, for sure. So it's planning one in a purposeful way, as far as what you are including, that you aren't missing out on these things. You're not missing out on the squats or whatever specific exercise, but you're also making yourself feel successful. And we've talked about the biggest predictor being consistent. Well, those two people we just talked about, those two members we just talked about, are their biggest thing they do is they're consistent. So making sure you're setting up a program with that intention can be the biggest thing for a game plan for success for you, of depending where you're at and being realistic about all those things. So,
yeah. So I think the mindset piece is super important. Like, can I make these, can I get these results? Can I be successful in 3 to 4 days a week? Particularly, let's talk about 3 again, because I think that's the average, that most people are probably hitting. Yeah. I mean, if you look at like the International Health Club Association, whatever, IRSA, which is Health, Sports, and Racket Club Association, they produce a lot of data on an annual basis, and it generally has to do with like the bigger health club organizations. So, for those that operate businesses like ours that are a little bit more personalized and specialized and things like that, they don't really talk to us too much. We're not good enough for them. But the bottom line there is, like, average usage for a month, like, and if for like in a monthly membership, is 2 fucking days per month.
Per month?
Yeah, that counts as average usage for most memberships.
Wow.
Now, I think probably things have changed. Now, keep this in mind. That data was true before COVID. I stopped paying attention to it after COVID because everything's changed. I mean, there were a lot of memberships sitting on books in places where people weren't using their memberships
at all
and paying them, and then they ended up canceling them. Laws changed, things like that. Okay. So that could have been skewing the number. But my point of that is that's kind of how it was measured. Mm-hmm. But even still, if you work in the gyms, you know what I'm talking about. There's those people that are diehards that are every day, 5, 6, 7 days a week. And then there's those who are like, they just occasionally come and they don't seem to have a plan when they show up, or the plan is always the same. Mm-hmm. Like, it's abs, arms, ass cheeks, and some cardio or something like that. Okay, so go back to the mindset. So how do I actually get it done in that amount of time, I think, is what people are kind of looking for. And again, the mindset piece is like, well, what's the quality of the work that I'm getting done in the time that I'm spending? So this kind of relates to the sleep challenge, right? Yeah. Or the sleep question. Like, okay, I slept 8 hours last night. Really? Did you? Okay, I get that you got in bed and you were in bed for 8 hours, but how much of that did you really sleep? Yeah. So how much time did you spend prior on your phone before you actually fell asleep? And then at what point did you start to get into your sleep cycles to where you were actually getting recovered? Mm-hmm. And then how many times did you wake up during the night to take a piss? You were alarmed by whatever, you just woke up, you're restless or whatever else. The point of this is just because you were in bed 8 hours doesn't mean you got restful sleep. That means the greatest result possible, right? Yeah. With regard to recovery and health and all those things. Look at the gym, and I mean, some people are very focused. They get in and they're getting it done. I have to do it that way. Otherwise, I'll be in there for hours. Mm-hmm. Like,
I almost set it up that way. I like to program that way, or set up my weeks where a lot of times I'll put myself where I have 2 clients and I'll have a gap in between that. And yes, I'm blessed because obviously I work in a gym, but I like to set up where, oh shit, I only have an hour, because then it makes it where I'm efficient. I'm tracking things at all these variables that need to be controlled. It makes it where I'm just getting the work done, versus when I try to do my workout when I have a couple hours, that's when I dilly-dally and it's just not good. So
yeah. So setting up, like, coming in with the mindset, like, for the time that I'm spending, how much return on investment am I really getting? And so there's a few things to look at there. Volume and intensity is one of those things. Volume being how much work can I get done in this amount of time? And then the intensity of the volume and the time that I have to spend. How hard am I working? And am I working at the rate I need to work in order to maximize the most out of the time that I'm spending? So again, it's not the chicken or the egg, but that part is really important. So I go into the gym all the time and I see, even here, people are dicking around, you know, like it's wandering, you know, that's like, if you got to get a drink of water, go get a fucking drink of water at the water fountain, come back. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. Okay. I get it if you're managing rest times, but look.
Yeah.
And it's also like tracking what you're doing and tracking the loads, but then also then tracking the repetitions and then tracking your rest time. So, you know, I just had this conversation the other day with a couple of individuals who were in here on Saturday. And this one individual's been on a program on a certain block for about 4 weeks. And she was telling me, yeah, so I'm supposed to change up the block next week. But yet when she was doing her kettlebell squats, she had done, I think, 15 repetitions for the first build set, or maybe it was like 8. And then the second set was like 15. Yeah. So by that point, she'd already done 20 something squats when she hadn't even gotten to her working set, much less her working load. So then when she got to her first set of her working load, she ended up doing maybe 8 at a heavier load, but she was gassed. So if her parameters for her set was supposed to be anywhere between 8 to 12, and by the time she got to her first working set and she was able to get 8, but she's already done 20 some sets of squats. I mean, that was all garbage squats basically up until that point. I
think that goes over a lot of people's heads.
Yeah. Oh, you know? So just, and then I had the conversation with her about, hey, look, you know, you need to be more efficient with your build sets, like 3 sets or 3 repetitions. Do a couple build sets, get to your working loads, and then work in your 8 to 12 repetition range. And when you do that, just because it says 8 to 12 doesn't mean that you stop at 12 if you have a few more. What that means is you have not picked the appropriate load for the intensity of that exercise.
This is a box ticking exercise is what I just heard you describe. So if I did the things. Okay, but just ticking the boxes and expecting a result from ticking the boxes doesn't make a lot of sense.
You know, we're talking about efficiency, and I talk about this a lot with other coaches or other participants, things like that. Let's talk about like the goal of a warm up, whether it's the exercises maybe that you're building as a primer or the build sets for the specific exercise. The goal is to prime to get your body ready for the movement without tipping over to that point of fatigue, right? And so a lot of people, they have these garbage warm-up sets, but they do too many warm-up sets or too many build sets or too many warm-up exercises to now they're fatigued, they're drained that tank, now they've gone over to something, now it's impacting their working sets. So finding that sweet spot for you of, you know, how many reps do you need? How many sets do you need? How much time do you need to do this to get the minimum response to be able to handle your working loads so that you are fresh, you're warmed up, but you have as all that in the tank that you need to have those effective working sets. So that's, I think, where we've talked about a lot about like garbage volume in general. So why a lot of people feel they need to do 6 days and have, because they're so inefficient, because they're doing way too many reps of these low intensity things that aren't a good stimulus and not enough intensity or actual intention on the things that are actually stimulating, if we're talking muscle growth or even other activities.
Yeah, so if the goal is to stimulate muscle hypertrophy and or continued strength gains. So exactly. I just want to be clear about that. Like, it's not like just because you're working out and you're not pushing heavy loads all the time doesn't mean it's worthless. But if your goal, if your goal is to build muscle, build strength, and progress, then these things are super important. So just drawing a clear distinction there. So we talk about like mindset coming into it and understanding those things. Like, again, a lot of the way that when I was having these conversations post this podcast, and it's no different than a lot of other ones I've had. I was like, man, we need to cover this because clearly it's getting lost on people. If you're walking into some of these workout programs where, for example, let's go back to the Monday through Friday type of routine. What do we train on Mondays?
Chest day.
It's chest day. Chest day. That's what we do on Mondays.
So I've been told.
It's chest day. So everybody in there's working chest, and everybody's got a workout program that's got somewhere probably between at least 2 to 4 exercises for chest. Right? Because
not more. I mean, that's honestly.
So I'm saying at least. So you have to do bench press, right? Because you're not going to get any gains without doing bench press.
Of course, no. How much do you bench, bro?
Right, exactly. So that's critical. You absolutely have to do an incline dumbbell press, because if you're not doing that, then you're just completely wasting your time. You missed the boat. If you're not doing some type of chest fly, then you're never going to get any gains. You get where I'm going with this. Like, this is just like kind of the mindset, where the reality of it is it doesn't. That's not necessarily true. All of those exercises have value. We use all of them here. all the time. But you don't have to layer them all on top of one another in the same workout in order to get in the same workout to get the result. We talked about this before. We talked about this in, again, building muscle over 40, and that is spreading the workout over the week. So you don't have to have, so get out of the mindset where if I'm not doing 9 sets to 12 sets of my chest, then I'm not going to get my pump or my gains. That's not entirely true. If you're a very advanced, lifter, and you have a very, very specific program, and you know how to manage intensity through that entire workout, and I mean really understand yourself, the loads that you need to use, and maybe you can be really successful at that over a long period of time. I don't think most people train like that, that are looking for gains, the huge gains anymore, or those people, that have been successful with bodybuilding, muscle building, and things like that, train much like that. They do divide the work up. So they're going to be hitting those body parts more than one time during the week, which again is getting outside of an old mindset. And so a lot of people listen to this, come on, dude, that's so old school. Like, of course, everybody knows that. No,
people don't.
They do not know that. And that's why we're covering it. So.
Well, and man, this is where it takes some self-awareness. I think that's the biggest thing as far as that kind of idea, because I can think about for myself, even when I was more of a novice lifter, like I can think, and now I apply this a lot, I feel a very, very specific steep fall off of a specific muscle when I'm working it. So if I do my 2 to 3 chest exercises, if I get to a third chest exercise, I can feel like I'm not handling anywhere near the load that I could handle if I was fresher for this. So being aware of like, okay, it's not just that you're trying to destroy the muscle, you're trying to get to a point where you actually have an effective stimulus. So being aware, we keep using the example of a chest exercise. Hey, if you're getting to your 4th exercise and you're having to do your chest flies with 15-pound dumbbells when really you could probably do it with 45-pound dumbbells, that's where we're kind of talking about you're not being efficient. It's not a good use of your time. It's really not getting you where you want. And this is where maybe you need to have that awareness we need to restructure some things so I can actually get the most out of this. So
so let's talk about the structure of a workout, or structuring your week and your workouts around this 3-day-a-week sort of approach. And again, like this is going to be individualized, like depending on your goal and the things that you're trying to get accomplished, both, with regard to your specific fitness goals, but also like in your day and, maybe beyond. So let's look at the week. So the first thing is we got 3 days a week, right?
Yeah.
I like that if you have a 3-day-a-week plan, it actually provides you lots of flexibility.
Oh yeah. There's tons of ways you can do this. Yeah.
So go back to like what we were saying at the beginning, like if you have a very specific plan where Monday we do what?
Chest.
Right. Right. And then Tuesday is back
and by.
Right. And then so you, again, everybody kind of understands that. So what happens if you miss Tuesday? Well, then you got to put Tuesday's, workout on Wednesday. But then what happened to Wednesday's workout? Well, then that got pushed to Thursday.
Yes.
Then what ends up leaving the table? Something's going to get pulled off the table. Going to 90% of the gyms around your neighborhood, and what gets left off the table? Fucking leg day all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Unless you're a female. Leg day never gets missed if you're a female, but if you're a male, that shit gets missed all the time, right?
Man.
Right? So I saw this good meme the other day where it was like the dude with like what gyms look like nowadays, and it was like, let's just say it's a couple like leaving the gym. They're both in their workout outfits, and the dude's just fucking jacked up top, and he's got like sticks for legs. And the female's like, she's got a nice upper body, but she's got massive ass and massive legs. That's pretty much what we're looking at anymore. But you get the point.
Yeah.
So you're missing things. Like you end up pushing things. Things get pushed around. And again, as the energy goes down or the time, now it's Friday. Friday's leg day. Shit, I got started a half hour late. But my happy hour starts in 30 minutes. So what do I take off the table? With the 3 days a week, it allows you to push things around. And because we're going to be, and we'll get to this in a second, we're going to be hitting everything at least 2 times per week.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to make stuff up. You're not going to ever go so long where things aren't going to get a stimulus to get your muscle growth and your gains.
Yes.
So you can come in on Monday, maybe you don't work out Tuesday, you work out on Wednesday, or maybe you do work out on Tuesday and then you don't work out again until Friday. Yeah. You can push things around the plate.
Yes. Yeah, man. I was just thinking, I had this conversation, about this, or have this conversation with some clients, especially one of our consistent clients in here right now, where he, Monday's the day that we do his squats, right? And so, but then we had a day where we missed, and then Wednesday was our bench day, and then we missed a day. And instead he's like, wait, why are we hitting our deadlifts on Monday right now? I was like, well, we never deadlifted on Friday. We missed that workout. We need to hit our deadlifts. We can't just throw it in.
That's funny.
And first is like, oh no, it has to be tied to the day of the week, right? So I think that happens a lot for people when they, example, like leg day, they miss that you can't miss this stimulus on one, if it's the only day you work that body part. If you're going 12 days now, because without touching your legs, like you're losing muscle mass, you're not getting the stimulus to continue to grow. So I think that's where this full body training can really help, because like you said, even if you have to play some things around, even if you have a couple day trip that popped up, you still had a day where you hit some sort of stimulus on that specific muscle, even if it wasn't the specific exercise.
So key takeaways are flexibility here.
Yes.
Secondly, that you're going to be hitting everything 2 times at least per week in your 3 days, which would be the same as you might be hitting it in a 7-day split in some type of an aesthetics program, like in our aesthetics program, which is in our online membership. You're hitting everything twice inside a 7-day training split.
Yeah.
It actually works out to be 8 in total days, but over a 7-day period. The point of this is you're hitting things, you're getting your volume in, right? Okay, so going back. So that's how I think those are the things you got to think about, like on a weekly basis. I have 3 workout days per week. Everything gets done in those 3 days. I'm going to be stimulating everything at least 2 times a week, in some cases more, depending on what that 3rd day looks like, right?
Yeah. And
then lastly, like I can move it around, right? And so if I missed a day, I stick with the workout that I missed. Like if I missed that day that I was supposed to do this workout on, I don't go back to the beginning based on, well, it's the 2nd day of the week, so I need to do the 2nd workout of the week. I pick up where I left off. So it helps you stay a little bit more organized. Okay, so then let's look at like what the structure of those workouts looks like, right? Okay, so if I was going to, again, build muscle, get and stay fit, I still get my gains in only 3 days, how would those workouts sort of be built? So let's talk about workout structure. So we talked about the week. Let's talk about it on like a daily basis, without getting into the weeds of all the exact exercise selections that we would take a look at. So here's how I would look at it in my mind to break it down. If I had an hour and 15 minutes to work out, going back to that, 3 to 4 hours a week here versus the 6 to 8 that I got planned that I'm not really doing anyways, right? I would look at it as like, okay, when I go into the gym and if I start to calculate how many sets, how many reps, I could do in that amount of time. If I had 3 sequences, right? Very specifically planned sequences of about 3, maybe 4 sets in some cases, maybe only 2 in other cases. And I was working at the intensity level in order to get the gains, right? Also at the rest times to get the gains. I could get through that workout in about an hour and 15 minutes, right? Depending on whatever. Maybe I have to wait for a piece of equipment, or, maybe I'm feeling extra fatigued, so I'm taking a little longer rest times, or, I'm trying to figure out this new exercise, so I'm not sure about the load. So I recognize that first set I just did. I'm not counting that. I'm going to count that as a build set. You guys get what I'm saying, right? So it's about an hour and 15 minutes. So if I had to get it all done, I'm looking at this like, okay, I'm going to choose 3 very well organized sequences, right? Within of maybe 2 to 3 exercises per piece, a piece. And that's how I'm going to organize my daily workout program. And then from there, I got to look at it and, kind of play the chess game throughout the week to make sure I hit everything the same way. But if I structure all of them the same way, right? That's easy. It's kind of like a matrix of how do I fit things in. So, what else you want to say about that in terms of just kind of the weekly organized schedule?
Well, I think the weekly organized schedule is one, because we're talking about all systems, right? So we want to, have the days where we're working on some primary strength movement. So I generally have like 2 days with a client or with myself or whatever following this format where we're getting like that primary strength movement, that high stimulating, high fatiguing kind of thing in. And then maybe that 3rd day, it's maybe not as stimulating on that side of things, but maybe it's more, there's some conditioning components, some other full body kind of dynamic things. But then we can plug in and play with some sort of conditioning or cardio on each of these 3 days. So there's lots of way we can do that. You can pilot to one day or balance it out. But really where we kind of ramp up into a workout where we get this main stuff. And then as we taper off to the workout, we're starting to get more into these ancillary components where we're kind of isolating the things that we're not hitting or doing the arms thing, stuff like that. And then towards the end of the workout, we can throw in whatever that cardio conditioning component is for that day in that specific intensity. And that can vary from day to day as well. So,
yeah. Okay. So what you just put, what I think I heard you say was, first off, conditioning is important and we want to make sure we've got a part of that.
Especially we want to be well-rounded, all of that. Yes.
If it's not important for you, then don't do it. Whatever. We always going to advocate for, we should be getting some level of conditioning into your fitness program, right? Call it cardio if you want. I don't like that term, but we've used it in the past because it's what people recognize. But we're talking about building your aerobic and anaerobic systems and the engine that exists there to be able to work at different intensity levels for different periods of time.
Yeah.
Your ability to do work. And if you want to continue to make gains in only 3 days a week, the capacity piece is going to be important. So something to think about. If you're like, fuck it, I'm not doing that. Okay, don't do it then. Fine. Yeah. I don't care. But if we're looking at those 3 sequences, you mentioned, okay, in those first 2 sequences, right, which are likely going to be within about the first 20 minutes-ish, 25 minutes of our work, 20 to 30 minutes of our
40 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, of our
40,
workout.
yeah.
That's where the intensity is going to show up, right? The bigger, heavier, more taxing lifts, the ones that people are more familiar with, that's when you see your squatting. That's when you see your deadlifting. That's where you're going to see your bench pressing, your big heavy pulling, upper body pull stuff.
Or your explosive stuff.
Or it could be your explosive stuff, which would happen right at the beginning. And then maybe you see that intensity through the more, I guess, traditional, strength building stuff in sequence number 2.
Yeah.
So we're stacking all the intensity at the beginning of the workout. And then we have to look at okay, so how do we do that and be efficient? So you just said as many as 40 minutes. Okay, so does that mean I'm doing all legs for 40 minutes? No.
Oh, that's not efficient at a certain point. Yeah.
It isn't. So we have to do a little this interplay, and people have heard this before, like upper lower, push pull, extension, knee dominant versus hip dominant stuff. And so this is where we lose people because they're like, all right, well, so what exactly should I be doing? And I want to be careful about that. We have that stuff where we'll talk about it. You guys can get that programming for us. It's really not that complicated, and we didn't invent it. Yeah. But if you need it organized or structured, we have programs, and we'll talk about those and how you can get a discount on that. But the point of this is what does that look like? So again, without getting too far into the weeds with the exact exercise selection, what would sequence 1 look like on a Monday if we're looking at how does this balance ourselves out throughout the week?
So sequence 1 on a Monday could be something like, you do an explosive exercise. Let's say you pick, 3 exercises. And one could be a full body explosive exercise followed by then maybe a pull type of exercise followed then by, let's do more of a superset with a push. For example, upper body push or a lower body pull and an upper body push.
So this is okay. So the first thing I heard you say there was more of an upper body dominant sequence, which you could do. That's one way to do it. The other one was an upper lower, right, where you're basically getting sort of reciprocals of one another. One's the big upper body movement you just did. Now you're moving to the lower body, so that upper body has a little bit of time to recover. You're being efficient with your time, while going into that lower body movement where, again, now that's going to be trashed, or whatever, fatigued, if you want to look at it that way. And then you're going back to the top and starting over again. So you're getting this kind of this pumping action, if you will, or lack of a better term. There's probably a better one, but you're getting kind of this upper, lower, we're moving things around, we're moving the demands around so that I can still stay with a certain level of intensity while continuing to get the benefits of the stimulus that I need in order to recover beyond the stimulus that I gave it so that I come back stronger and with those gains. Yeah,
the big thing that we mentioned with all this is generally if you're trying to be efficient and you are doing things with supersets or compound sets, a great way to think about it is something that's non-competing. So doing a rowing exercise generally isn't going to impact doing your squats that much, right? They're not really competing. It's not damaging the same muscle, right?
Yeah, and you're not having to double grip. So, you're squatting with whatever the implement is and then you're pulling with your grip. So non-competing. Whereas if you had to deadlift or hold something for your legs and your hands, but then you're turning around and you're doing some type of upper body pull and you're having to pull again, then you're working your grip. And that's generally what's going to give out for some people before their legs or their upper body.
Exactly. So yes, there are intentions sometimes of doing like a compound set, or like we've talked about, a contrast set is another great way to get an explosive exercise. So there is some more nuance there. But if you are getting to the second exercise and you're thinking, man, I can't really do this very well because I'm trash from the first exercise, then that's probably you've ran into some sort of mistake, especially this early in the workout. Maybe later in the workout, you would see something where there's some drop sets, compound sets, where you're really trying to get a heavy, hard stimulus on something. But if you're doing that at the beginning of the workout and you're just trashing that, that's going to impact the rest of the workout.
Trashing that, you mean as in fatigue?
Overly fatiguing that. Even your full body, your full CNS, or that specific area.
Yeah, you've challenged yourself to a level where you cannot do the skill. You can't perform the skill. And you cannot perform the intensity within the skill that you need to in order to elicit the best result. Again, we're talking about muscle building right here. And you did bring up the power piece and placing that right at the beginning. So if you're doing some type of Olympic lift, you're doing a power clean or something, that's where you put that. You put that right at the beginning when you're fresh. CNS is fresh, and then you maybe move into, your...
That, or you just do that. You do that exercise and you do your rest periods, and that's what you do for that first sequence or that first block.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you move into your other compound lifts.
So if that's what we're doing kind of in sequence one, right? And we gave a couple scenarios there, like it was like more upper body dominant, right? And then we moved to like the knee dominant, there was the power, then the upper body dominant sequence there, right? Yeah. So if we just stayed with that, right? And then we moved into sequence number 2, what would that look like in terms of structure?
So your structure could be more of like a lower body dominant exercise for a compound lift. So whether that's a squat or a hinge, that's non-competing with what you did in sequence 1.
So like my preference here, because we did, like we talked about pushing, there was a power movement and then there was the pushing. Yeah. I would go more to like a knee dominant movement that would also be coupled with like a pull, a heavy body, upper body, or a heavier, more intense upper body pull, whatever that is. So maybe that's where you're putting your squats. Maybe that's where you're putting Romanian or your Bulgarian split squats or something like that. Something that you can really load up, right? From the knee dominant perspective, and then move that into the pulling perspective. So maybe that's your weighted pull-up. Maybe that's your seated row. Maybe that's your single arm dumbbell row, or maybe that's your pen lay row or something like that, where it's heavy and intense. Yeah.
And that's where, I mean, that's a good thing to think about too, as far as now you're still at that point where you are keeping high intensity in this sequence, because you really shouldn't be, let's say, overly fatigued or trashed from the first sequence at this point, especially with these specific muscles. But this is where also, if we go back with the example 2 of where we did more of like where we did maybe the lower body dominant in sequence 1, but let's say it was more of like a knee dominant in sequence 1. What I like to do into sequence 2 is that's where I'd maybe get more of the unilateral work for the opposite. So like more of the hip dominant kind of movement. So yeah, maybe the squat versus the single leg RDL or the kickstand RDL or something like that in sequence 2, in conjunction with the other movements.
So what we're talking about is your bigger complex movements are happening in those first 2 sequences. Yes. This is where your intensity lies. And this is not that there's no intensity in sequence 3, but you need to have enough in the tank to make what you're doing, also knowing that your tank is draining as you go. Yes. So sequence 1, you got more quote unquote gas in the tank than you will in sequence 2. So combine, how you choose exercise, your exercise selection there based on the goal for the day, right? As it relates to the goals for the week and getting through the other 2 days, which we'll get to here in a second. Those are important. And so there's nuance there. So again, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out, but this is where people are like, that's work. Yeah. Right. And that's what I got with my conversations outside of that podcast, was just like, oh, I never thought of it that way. I kind of get it. So hold on. So let me understand you correctly. So they were trying to like pick their own exercises and kind of put this workout together in their head and taking notes on the other side. And I'm like, yes, you could do that, but there's always depends. Yes. Right. And it's also, what are you good at? What should you be doing? And all these things. So it is very individual in that sense, but the framework isn't. And so for people that are listening to this, like, dude, this sounds like conjugate method style training. In a sense, it is, right? Yeah. That's what we're talking about. We're combining these different modalities, right? Different energy systems. We're stacking them in ways where we can get the most out of them throughout a course of a workout, a week, a training cycle, if you will. So we're just kind of breaking it down to try to be a little bit more simplistic. All right, so we mentioned, so just wrapping up those first 2 sequences. Those are the goals for those 2 sequences. Now, as we move into sequence 3, this is where you're going to start seeing things are maybe a little less complex, maybe a little bit more isolated. This is where you're starting to throw in, your focus for the day maybe on your arms, your abs, your shoulders, those extremities, we'll call them like ancillary or auxiliary stuff. And how it's stacked is going to be sort of relative to what you just did in those first 2 sequences. Yep. Like if I did a very chest dominant, upper body dominant, chest dominant day with in sequence number 1 there, and I only did the 1 pull in sequence number 2, I'm probably going to try upper body pull. I'm going to probably choose something in sequence number 3 that goes back to the pulling, that sort of that matches up to what I did from a reciprocal situation with all my pushing. I'm probably going to try and get some shoulder retraction in there and some other pulling, but do it in a way, right, that isn't so heavily loaded where I can really focus on shoulder mechanics or a very specific thing. Yeah, I don't know. An example might be like a seated reverse fly on the machine. Where it's very isolated, and I'm getting those rear delts, getting that rear shoulder, musculature, that kind of stuff. Yeah. As an example, so as people are listening, again, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds and writing out a whole workout program here, but that's how I might think about it. And that's when I throw in the arms or the abs.
And maybe you do your lateral movement patterns and your rotations.
Yep.
Rotationary things.
So that's kind of where that falls in. And this could also be where you add in a little bit of like metabolic conditioning, because the exercise we just described don't take as much recovery from, number 1. Number 2, the skill level there is generally fairly low in terms of what we're demanding on the body. This is where you can add in, a more demanding, sort of metabolic conditioning type of work that doesn't have to be an eternity to do. So you could either do it after or you could do it during, right? And just rest a little longer before you get back to your rear delt, arms, rotation, whatever else. So that could be any number of things: skiers, rowers, bikes, running. There's a million ways to skin a cat there. Maybe it's like some med ball work. Maybe it's a Bulgarian bag work. Maybe it's some kettlebell work, something like that can get your heart rate up, and you're starting to take, working to different energy system during that time. It doesn't necessarily have to be uber complementary. Don't think about it like that. Just think about it. This is my time to tax this energy system. Don't try to put it, well, because I did this over here and I'm fatigued. No. We're past that now. We're past that now. If you're trying to really manage your fatigue in that particular thing, maybe running on a heavy knee dominant day, all right, maybe you don't want to do that. Maybe you choose cycling or skiing as a choice. But anyway, the idea there is that's where you're kind of putting in your ancillary work and maybe a little bit of Metcon. And maybe that's longer, slower distance cardio, and you're doing a little bit longer. Maybe it's more like 20 to 30 minutes of something that you're doing. So that might extend the workout time, right? From an hour and 15 to an hour and 30, all in. Versus, and then on another day, when we move to the next day, there's less time spent there because you're maybe doing a higher intensity, lower duration type exercise. So now you're more like the 115, going back to you can do this in 3 to 4 hours a week. So in brief, if people kind of wrap their heads around how we organize that day 1, then you could just go to day 2 and go, okay, how do I flip-flop this? Yeah. How do I, number 1, flip-flop my first 2 sequences to complement what I did on day 1? And then when I look at my 3rd sequence, or maybe the 4, maybe there's 4 there, depending on what you're doing, how do I do the things that I didn't do? Yeah. Right. So what got left out, right? If it was arms were my auxiliary, maybe it's the rotation in the abs, and if it was rotation in the abs on day 3, you can see where this is going. Maybe it's the lateral work, right? And my delts, something like that. So again, I'm hitting everything multiple times during the week.
Yeah, and then kind of what you're talking about, this is where, when all this exists, you can kind of play back and forth with like you're giving the priority. So yeah, maybe the conditioning on that day is a little bit more priority on the day 2. And maybe that 3rd sequence isn't a lot of other ancillary stuff. And it's a little bit more of maybe the long, slow distance that's going to take more time, things like that, or the thing that's going to tax you more. But really that's where you can also, there's an individuality of like, what are you trying to work on in that block? So So even when you're having this kind of idea of all these things exist in like a conjugate kind of style method, you can still be like, okay, I want to work on my arms, so I'm going to choose some maybe more of my ancillary movement. Maybe I'm doing that a little bit extra sets on day 2, 3, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's flexibility.
There's flexibility for sure. So, but really the thing is that's where you're thinking of like, okay, what am I missing and what do I need to still cover? And that's where you can choose, like you said, those things that are not super complex, not super intense or take a lot, but you're covering these bases. You just want to cover all the bases basically. So
yeah, it's a good time to add in you can refer to as corrective exercise, the things that, your problem areas or your quote unquote focus areas.
I was just going to go back to, this is where it becomes really important, I think, to plan out your workouts on your days so that you have it in front of you before you even get to the gym. So you can look at it and see, okay, so this is what I'm doing on this day. This is what I'm doing on this day. And this is what I'm doing on that third day. Right. So, you know exactly what you're showing up to do.
It's been decided.
Yeah.
Purposeful planning.
If you're worried about being efficient and you're trying to show up and figure out your workout while you're there, that's not going to be efficient. You're going to spend that much time doing that.
Goes back to mindset. Mm-hmm. So day 3 is your opportunity to make up whatever you didn't do. Mm-hmm. It's also the opportunity to work on or focus on, within those first 2 sequences, the areas that you really want to focus on. So again, like, hey, I'm really trying to build my butt and legs here. Yeah. So maybe it's another more hinge dominant day and you're choosing exercises that really emphasize, hip extension versus maybe a little less knee extension with the hip extension. Yeah. So maybe that's where you're putting in, this is maybe where you're putting in more of your hip thrust day or something like that, where you're adding or you can kind of pile on. It's also a day where you can really adjust maybe what you're doing on the conditioning side of things. Mm-hmm. So maybe I am doing some focuses and within those first 3 sequences or those first 2 sequences on like what I just mentioned. And then that last sequence is way more conditioning versus those, auxiliary or ancillary things like arms and abs and things like that.
And maybe because on that day, maybe because those first 2 sequences maybe aren't as taxing for you to do. Hip thrusts for me are a lot easier to do than back squats, right? It's not good. It doesn't take as much thought. It's not as fatiguing. So maybe that conditioning work on that third day compared to your conditioning work on your second day. Maybe your second day, it's just getting on an assault bike and working. There's not a lot to think about. Where you're on this third day, maybe this can be some more of that kind of skill, that med ball, that full body, that conditioning, that kettlebell work, that all that kind of stuff, where you're having to put a little bit more intention and effort on it because you have the ability to. So,
yeah. So that's kind of like a 3-day-a-week kind of plan. So I'll come back to that in a second. But going back to flexibility, here's the other thing this leaves room for. So if you're one of those people that also likes to ride your bike, likes to run, right? Or trail run, that likes to get out, like it's that time of year where people are out doing different stuff, whether it's being outside, it's paddleboarding, it's surfing, it's kayaking, it's all kinds of stuff. Some of these people I talk to are very active outside of the gym. This allows for that activity, right? Yeah. So you should be able to do these workouts, still go enjoy that activity and not feel trashed, and not feel like you have to sacrifice a workout in the gym in order to do the activity, or vice versa. Yeah. Right? Sacrifice your gym work or your gym work to get the activity done, or sacrifice your activity to get the gym work done. Yeah. And thereby maybe overtraining or going back to this mindset piece, lacking on the consistency and whatever.
Yeah. I was actually just having a conversation with a buddy of mine about, he's a jiu-jitsu guy. So he's on the mat every single day. He's working hard. He wants to do that. And he was kind of talking about, a few months ago, he was really on. He was lifting 5 days a week and doing jiu-jitsu work 5 days a week. But he started to feel, that's a lot to manage with some other things going on in his life, busy schedules, while also trying to keep his time on the mat. So we were talking about programming and things like that, and how I structure a lot of times, and it'd probably be a good idea for someone like him to structure in more of a full body movement, this kind of breakdown, maybe even fewer days, but more intensity. Because what you'll notice for that is, if you are someone who needs to be fresh, but when you start implementing your programming like this, you'll feel a lot more recovered after maybe those first couple of weeks. You'll feel a lot more recovered, a lot more fresh, a lot more of the ability to enjoy life and not just be suffered because you destroyed your legs on Monday and now you can't walk the rest of the week. You can't get on the mat or get on the bike or get on the paddleboard. So it was a timely conversation I just had with him this weekend. So yeah,
it goes back to the I think just the communication that happened after that EP 148, and I was like, okay, there's some things that could probably be addressed here to help people maybe have a better understanding of how to organize their week. And again, it was an over 40 crowd, but it wasn't just the over 40. It was geared towards the over 40 crowd, but it wasn't in a way like, hey, if you're not 40 yet, there's things to be thinking about. And I did get a couple of phone calls from folks who are quite a bit younger going, hey man, that really resonated with me. I'm struggling to get it done, get everything done in my life and in my workouts, you know, and I feel like I'm failing here. Well, let's just take a different approach to the success rather than continually work and continually coming up shy of where we need or want to be. So again, when you're looking at this, one of the ways to look at this is maybe 3 days a week isn't what you can do right now. That same method applies in 2 days a week.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
If that's all you got, right? And well, we always suggest let's get 3. You know, 3 is definitely better. 4 is great. Again, if it's applied appropriately and organized perfectly. But you know, look, in 3 days a week or even 2 days a week, you can get a great result. Particularly, again, that's a great example. The person that's on the mat all the time, it's hard to find additional time, energy, and also you have to get there, right, to do those workouts. But if you could commit to, if you got yourself organized and you did 2 days a week, like we just suggested, even in 2 sequences, not even 3, right, and hit those major primary movements to drive strength and drive some gains, and again, continued strength and maybe hypertrophy for you if that's what you're looking for, then you could get a lot done there.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think about when you're like in college or high school or whatever, and you're studying for the exam and you stay up all night and it's just this garbage studying because you're trying to just get the work done, right? So it's kind of, a lot of people do that with their exercise. So they're so focused on needing to get there 6 days a weekend, where really you could probably get better results for a lot of people doing the 2 to 3 days, but it's intentional. You're rested. We were just having a conversation with a client, not getting enough rest. Anyways, but that kind of intentional work will put you a lot more in a place for success than trying to just, I'm getting the work, but it's drag it out and it's garbage and it's not effective, it's not efficient, and it's not good quality because maybe you are doing too much.
So I think this is the last, this is kind of where we'll wrap this up, and that is these folks that I were talking to, they kind of understand what you just said. They know they could be doing better, and they recognize like some days I'm on, some days I'm off, but they also recognize I'm not really getting what I need or I want out of what I'm doing. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I know it's not great. Yeah. They can't really put their finger on it. Well, we've just discussed a lot of things, and we use this term a lot. It's the nuance. And there are some very specific things that we talked about here that we could go into some deep rabbit holes on. Let's not do that. If you're feeling like that, like if you recognize, like, I know I could be doing that whole thing about like I'm tapering off at the end of the week. I know I'm leaving things out. I tend to gravitate to the things that I'm good at or I just like doing. I never do the stuff, or I always cut the stuff out that I don't like doing or is hard for me. People know this. And I think that was the reason for the reaching out, was like, how do I make this better? So that's a good thing. So how do you do that? How do you keep yourself organized? CeCe, you nailed it. And that is, if it's just done for you, if it's written out in front of you, God, it makes life so much easier. Even if it's not a perfect plan, because none of them are, right? But if it's a plan and you don't have to think about it and you can just kind of follow along, there is some still sense of like checking boxes. Like, did I get through this? Did I get through that? We've just kind of walked you through how to make sure when you do check that box, you can feel good about checking it, right? But there are lots of different programs out there. Again, if you kind of get online and you're searching around for, you know, what people are selling, what people are doing, very rarely are you going to hear about the 2 or the 3 day a week program. That's the smart coaches that have been doing this a long time recognize there's a massive market for that, because the majority of the population doesn't work out 6 days a week.
Yeah, they don't.
I don't think that's a hard pill for most people to swallow there with an understanding, the pill of understanding. For those people listening to this, most people are like, I don't work out 6 days a week, you know, or whatever. I don't work out 6 days a week. Like, I don't want to. So, and that's part of the reason they're not doing it. Yeah. Secondly, it could be a time thing. Thirdly, could be like they're deconditioned and they're trying to figure out their way back into it. Again, we talk about time. There's also a commitment thing. I just don't want to do it, or I'm not ready for that yet, for whatever the reasons are. Totally get it. But the other thing is they're trying to balance it out with other stuff. And I'm not saying they don't have time to work out. They just haven't balanced what they're doing. Maybe the jiu-jitsu guy was a really good example of that. Like, if I don't go to jiu-jitsu one day, then I'm then I'm a loser. Yeah. Or I'm just getting my ass kicked, the next time. Like, just because you go to jiu-jitsu 6 days a week doesn't mean you're going to win every time. Yeah. Like, if that's the reason you're going to jiu-jitsu, I would ask you to examine that. Yeah. Right. Hardcore. And you talk to people that have been doing it a long time, like they'll have a nice little conversation with you about, like, what are you actually getting done while you're there? Yeah. I digress. Point of this is having a done for you plan can be I guess from a mindset perspective, can really be helpful. And one of the things it'll do is even if you get into it and you recognize this really isn't for me, you will learn a lot about all the things that we talked about. And a lot of it is very intuitive, like, oh, I'm not really working hard enough. If I only have to do 3 sequences, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm used to doing 5, right? In my current workout program or whatever else. And I'm walking into sequence 2 and I'm not, and I recognize I have all this energy left and I had so much more to give in the first instance. This is what you were saying about the kettlebells and the, you've effectively just ticked the boxes. You can go back and you can re-examine that, whether you like the workout program or not, right? Those are things to examine as you go through something like this. So the pitch is this. There's a couple of different ways to get this from Red Dot Fitness if you're interested. One would be within our online membership program. There's several different workout programs in there, but the one that follows this one the most closely would be the Total Body Conditioning Program. It is a 3-day-a-week program, which gives you an option for 4 if you want it. There is conditioning workouts that you can add into those things that aren't already kind of programmed in, say on day 3, to what Ryan described it earlier. If you missed that, this is where I might add a little bit more conditioning because we've added so much intensity in the strength movements earlier in the week. So it gives you flexibility there. The other place you could find it would be in Red Dot Fitness Strong, which is the more linear program. The online membership is sort of an ongoing program, and you're kind of just jumping into it where it is now. Versus, and we're constantly phasing that program as it continues to go on. Versus the Strong program is a great one. It's more linear, where you jump into it as the start of the program, and you can take that as long as you want. You could go back and repeat it. Ensures you own it. Or you can jump into the online membership knowing that now I've done all the things, right, and Strong to be conditioned for the ongoing membership program, that Total Body Conditioning. I will also say this, our Fit for Action program follows a similar format. It's just, I would say it's slightly more advanced. It looks very much like Red Dot Fitness Max. So the one that I recommended the most, and I'm already getting feedback on after this, podcast a couple weeks, was the Red Dot Fitness Strong program.
Awesome.
Because you can see the program out for 4 months. You know where you're going with it. And the interesting part is, and I'll say this about it, is the folks that I talk to have been doing whatever they've been doing for a very long time. And they already recognize, like, I have issues, right? And I've been working around those issues. And some of those issues are, I got the shoulder, I got the back, and I really have to be careful about this. And yes, I still find myself gravitating towards the same exercises, the bench press or whatever else. And I know I should probably be doing other stuff, but I also don't really care about it anymore, like in terms of how much I bench, bro. But at the same time, like I still have an emotional connection to it. And part of it is they just don't know what to put in.
Where?
They don't know what to replace it with.
Yeah.
So that's the great part. That's one of the great parts about the Strong program. The other part of it is it'll take you back to, let's just go back through some fundamental stuff from a movement perspective. Let's check in with where your strengths and your weaknesses are, which can then be a test that you can then reapply at the end of the 4 months. So 12 weeks is a long time, but it isn't, right? But you can see, here's where I am at week 1. This is where I'm going to week 12, if you will, and in week 16, in that 4-month program. And I can see my linear progress here. The program in and of itself looks linear, but the success that you get within it may not be. And that's the cool part about going through the process, is learning how all that works versus just ticking boxes and expecting that you're going to get a result and then not being happy with it or frustrated when you don't get it.
Yeah. I think the one piece of advice I would give for that program, and we talk about this a lot with anyone who's ran it, even when I ran it in the past, is be patient. It's okay for some of you, if you've been doing this for a long time, that first month may feel a little easy, but working on those foundational movements and building that back up, it probably isn't as easy as you think it is by looking at it, but be patient in that initial building phase. And then when you get to that 4-month phase, you'll really see and reap the benefits from that. So don't look at the initial start of the program and just want to skip ahead or be impatient or not be intentional. Take your time. It's okay to give your body a little bit of a breather break as you rebuild back up this big foundation to have success in the program. And you'll see that as you continue to repeat it and grow from there.
Yeah. Again, it's a 3-day-a-week program, optional 4. It gives you all the stuff, all the video demonstrations are in there, and all the instructions. There's also a huge amount of content in there just with regard to the education side. So you understand what you're doing and why, which I think is really important. And I think those are the missing pieces,
yes,
right, for a lot of people. So we took a lot of care, a lot of time in putting that stuff in there. I know a lot of people don't like to read everything. So some of there's reading. And then we've also have tutorial videos so you can watch and listen, which, these podcasts are very much a part of that. A lot of what you heard us say, we talk about there, but more specific to that program and how it works out. So if you're interested in Red Dot Fitness Strong, so it's our most popular muscle building and strength program, go to rdfstrong.com. And then when you get there, you'll be given 25% off. So again, rdfstrong.com. And then if there's any questions, about this, again, we've just talked about all the people that we fielded questions from just in the last couple of weeks. You can always reach out to us. Go to rdftrainonline.com, and then you can access Strong from there. But we have a contact page. We also have a phone here. You can call us. People actually still do talk on the phone. You can call us. You can even text us. And somebody will get back to you with whatever questions we can answer for you, or to set up an appointment to maybe go a little deeper into whatever it is that you're trying to get done. So again, that's rdftrainonline.com.